Thank you very much. So welcome everyone to the first breakout session for this afternoon. I'm Misty Terry and I will serve as the room host for this session. We have Dr. Karen Franck, who is going to be talking to us about lessons from evaluation of STEM program quality. Dr. Franck, I just covered up for Dr. Franck is a program evaluator and extension assistant professor at the University of Tennessee. She is a co-author with Dr. Joseph Donaldson on a mixed methods evaluation to measure 4-H STEM program quality. Dr. Franck, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here at SciFar, and it's really my honor to be presenting this information on behalf of myself and Dr. Donaldson, who was not able to be here. So I'm gonna share my screen. And hopefully everyone can see my slides okay. So I'm going to be talking about some of the results that came from this 4-H Science Building a 4-H Career Pathway initiative. This was a 3-year collaboration among National 4-H Council, Lockheed Martin, and 13 state partners to help youth develop STEM and workforce skills necessary for success, to immerse youth in the field of STEM work, and to engage youth with the science and engineering career pathway. So a key goal of this initiative was to involve more girls and minorities in STEM career fields. And the ultimate goal was to contribute to a robust pipeline for science professions in high demand, such as computer sciences and engineers. And we did have several benchmarks to engage over 30,000 youth, and have at least half of those be girls and underrepresented ethnic and racial minorities, to recruit 500 Lockheed Martin employees to serve as corporate volunteers, and to recruit an additional 1,000 volunteers to help with STEM programs in these 13 states. So today, my objective is to provide an overview of this initiative and to describe the major programming and outcomes of this initiative, and also to talk about best practices and recommendations for STEM programs, including what we learned about working with staff and volunteers. And this was a very large project, so there were a lot of findings in addition to what I'm going to be talking about today. So you have a link here to a publication that has all of the results, and there are several manuscripts that are also available if you're interested in things that we don't talk about today. So the reason, as many of you probably know, that 4-H and other positive youth development programs continue to emphasize STEM programming is the continuing concern that not enough people are enrolling in STEM courses in the US to keep pace with the growing number of jobs in these fields. And this is especially true for women and certain ethnic and racial groups that continue to be underrepresented in both STEM college courses as well as STEM fields. And it's really important to have diversity in these fields in order to increase creativity and innovation, as well as stay on the cutting edge. So this initiative came out of this need to increase the STEM pipeline, and it was based on a couple of different literature reviews that have been done in the past. So Donaldson and colleagues talked about several key factors related to why youth decide to pursue a STEM career. And many of these factors listed here can be nurtured through out-of-school time STEM programs. And those out-of-school time programs are an important way to help youth who might not otherwise be interested in STEM and might feel like in STEM courses in school that it's just not for them. But these out of school time experiences oftentimes can engage these youth to start to see themselves as STEM experts and to think of these as a potential career choice. And Riley and Butler also had recommendations that helped inform this initiative. And those were related to getting science experts involved in programming, recruiting these underrepresented youth through ongoing partnerships with partners like Lockheed Martin and other corporations, and then developing program activities to introduce youth to science careers. So out of these recommendations, National 4-H Council developed this original 4-H STEM career pathway as kind of a model for how we might be able to engage youth in these STEM out of school time activities. So the idea was that youth would be engaged and encouraged to proceed through the pathway by participating in different levels of activities and events. So the first phase, Explore, is just introducing and hopefully engaging youth who might not otherwise be engaged in STEM in some fun activities to start them on the pathway. And then the next phase is Learn, which has longer term experiences to continue to involve youth in STEM and get them interested. And then the third phase that youth could progress to is Practice. And it's composed of long-term rigorous projects to build both STEM and leadership skills. And then the final phase is this Experience phase, in which youth collaborate with STEM experts to gain careers and valuable marketable experience. So in order to test out this initiative and to sort of look at how this pathway was working, Dr. Donaldson and myself did a process evaluation of this 3-year initiative. And the purpose of this evaluation was to determine the extent to which the initiative goals were achieved. And the project was evaluated through focus groups, interviews, program observations, and youth surveys. This was a successful initiative. The 13 states engaged more than 86,000 youth in 4-H STEM activities, and almost half of those were girls, and over half were ethnic and racial minority groups. And they also demonstrated the ability to reach new audiences who might not have otherwise been involved in 4-H or in STEM. About 78% of the youth that were engaged, this was their first 4-H activity. The 4-H professionals that worked on this project had to have a lot of help. So they worked with a lot of volunteers, so over 4,200 volunteers who contributed over 16,000 hours of their time for these projects. And the 4-H professionals also allocated over 11,000 hours of their time towards this initiative. The typical Extension 4-H professional who was involved in this project managed 244 volunteers who collectively reached over 5,000 youth per year. We also did surveys with youth, and you can see here they completed 4-H Common Measure surveys that had questions related to STEM that were for youth in different grades. And almost all youth reported liking science and understanding how science will be important for their future. And then fewer youth translated this into doing science activities outside of school, and a little over half were interested in having a science-related job. So I want to take a pause here and kind of get your perspective and see what some of your biggest challenges have been delivering STEM programs for those of you that are doing this work out in the field. So what challenges do you guys face when you're delivering STEM programs? Okay, so I'm seeing differences between boys and girls, having challenges to accessing technology. Inconsistent attendance, typically in our urban communities. Staff who feel they can lead STEM. Okay. Well, I certainly can relate to some of these challenges, and that certainly happened. Some of these came about in this initiative too: volunteer training, attendance issues. Yeah. So here are some of the major challenges that we found from this STEM initiative. And I'm going to talk about these and have some examples. So one of the issues was this having difficulty recruiting volunteers. So I'm going to talk a lot about volunteers, and I know some of you may work with volunteers and some of you may work with employees, and I think it kind of works for both groups. But again, this whole idea of oftentimes it was difficult finding volunteers who were willing to go through STEM training if they weren't STEM experts. And another challenge that staff talked about was that parents really wanted anybody who was leading these STEM activities to be an expert. So it was often difficult recruiting parents who might want to be volunteers because they really wanted their children to have like top-notch STEM experiences, and they were a little bit put off if they found out that volunteers were kind of learning how to do it and weren't that far ahead of what their youth were doing. Another challenge was having staff and volunteers who really had limited STEM knowledge. So the 4-H agents don't traditionally have a STEM background or what we think of as STEM background. And a lot of them just did not feel comfortable with STEM subject matter. And they were really, 4-H staff are always confident about their ability to teach youth and other subjects, but quite a few of them are really intimidated by STEM. And a lot of the 4-H volunteers also. And because the staff were intimidated by STEM, a lot of them felt like they just couldn't provide the support that the volunteers needed in that subject matter. And then another challenge was that when they were able to recruit STEM expert volunteers, sometimes these people had very limited youth development skills, and they, might not be teachers. So you would run into situations where you'd have a great STEM expert, very knowledgeable in their field, but they really had a hard time translating that knowledge to youth. And they also struggled with, just knowing what was appropriate for different levels of youth and how to convey that information. So I'm going to talk now about some of our lessons learned and best practices from this initiative. And I hope those of you that are doing this out in the field can share some of your lessons learned as well, and some of the things that has been working for you. So one of the things that we learned was just this importance about connecting STEM to careers. And I wanted to start out with this because that was the whole purpose of this initiative, was to really feed that robust pipeline. And that's really the purpose of most of our STEM activities, is to get youth interested in science with the hope that they will translate that into a college career and then into a professional career as well. So really thinking about being deliberate about connecting these activities to what youth can be doing professionally as a career. And sort of incorporating that throughout our curricula and throughout our activities was important. It was also important to really start to be deliberate about thinking about how we can use these partnerships, like with Lockheed Martin and with other universities and other corporate partners, to really help our older youth develop skills through internships, job shadowing, and mentoring. That's just a place where in 4-H, at least through this initiative, we really had some deficits, and we really needed to work on developing those partnerships. I have here a great example of that at University of Maine through their extension. It's Follow a Researcher, and it gives some virtual connections between researchers and youth, and is a great model program for what potential we could do online. Another best practice was to develop and strengthen partnerships to provide diverse role models for youth. One successful practice was to connect with some of these societies and of women engineers and Society of Black Engineers. Texas had really good success connecting their youth with these two groups that are national organizations, and they encourage their members to do community service. So it was a real win-win for these groups to partner with 4-H, work with youth, develop trainings, and they did quite a few things virtually as well. And then also making sure we're connecting with corporations in our communities, such as Lockheed Martin, and connecting with local universities and college students. California had great representation from college students who were just excellent volunteers, especially science, youth that wanted to be science teachers really worked well as volunteers. Another thing that we learned was just the continuing need for ongoing training, and training that targets people at different levels. So some people need the introduction or the basic science, and then also levels that were more advanced for people that needed to have information that was more advanced. I have here Click to Science. This is a great resource that provides training in different STEM fields, and they also have some good computer science information up there as well. And making sure, one of the most successful things was states that provided hands-on training for their volunteers and for their staff. So basically just walking through different STEM activities that youth would do with the adults really worked well and was very engaging. Okay. Another best practice that we found was providing cultural competency training for 4-H staff as well as for volunteers, and really focusing on the emphasis of different cultures, how they feel about STEM, how they feel about college and things like that, was very important, and helped some of our states to be successful reaching some of these underserved and underrepresented groups of youth. And states that were the most successful were ones that really were deliberate in how they engaged families in these activities, through like dinners and through show and tell and having family activities. Really made a big difference in some of these programs, in allowing and having the parents really allow the youth to attend, and engaging everyone in that science activity really opened up a lot of opportunities for some of our youth. And then another training is looking at positive youth development training. So making sure, you know, we want to emphasize STEM, but we are positive youth development organizations, and it's really a critical part of what we do. So STEM activities are great and they're very important, but if you don't have a safe place where youth feel like they belong and they're accepted, it really doesn't provide that comprehensive experience that youth are really looking for and that parents are looking for their youth. So making sure that you have good positive youth development training is a key aspect of these programs. Corporate volunteers were very interested in things like simple tip sheets for how to work with different ages and for different types of developmental stages for youth, as well as just simple training about how to address common behavior issues and topics like how to work with challenging parents, which is something I think we all appreciate training in. Another best practice is really, if you're in a position to allow teens to have a strong leadership role, this can be very beneficial. We often joke about how teens and youth really know technology a lot more than we do as adults. And this is really true. Some of these youth are really the subject matter experts, and we are learning from them. And I think sometimes as adults, that makes us a little uncomfortable because, you know, we want to be the ones that know the subject, but I think it's fine to allow teens to have this sort of leadership role in STEM fields. It allows another role model for youth, and it provides them some great leadership experience. And obviously, you know, they need our help learning how to work with youth and to be good mentors, but it certainly is a great way to have some strong leaders and some subject matter experts. And then this final best practice that I want to touch on is just this idea of making sure that we are assessing our programs and our educators for continuous quality improvement. And I know sometimes this can be a little intimidating for people. It makes, you know, people hear assessment and they just think, you know, they're going to be judged or they're not doing a good job. But I do think it can be very helpful to make sure that we are really looking at what people are doing and using that as a way to improve our programs, not necessarily punitive, but how can we learn from what people are doing. And, you know, we can do things like feedback surveys where we get input from like youth participants and from parents. But I think one of the best things that we did was this initiative is we did these observations and we used this out of school time tool. that had a STEM plugin that really provided us some valuable information about what was going on in some of these programs. And this out of school tool is really easy to use. It has been validated. You can see here it has several domains related to youth and what youth are doing, related to how the staff is instructing and the contents of what's actually going on. And it also has information about what's being taught related to STEM skill development and practices. And this is just a little clip from the tool. You can see here you rate the different domains have indicators under each of them. You rate them on a scale of 1 to 7. And each of the indicators has, you know, a description. So this is what you're looking for. And you basically just watch a class and put down your ratings for all of the indicators. And what we found and why it was so valuable for our project is because it really gave us a view into what actually was going on. So we were able to see that the 4-H professionals and the volunteers who were delivering these programs we're really doing a great job of engaging the youth, of having youth ask questions, of encouraging youth to get along with each other, all of these wonderful positive youth development practices that we all want to see in our programs. But when we really looked at the STEM skills and the questions related to STEM, what we found is they were kind of missing the mark in drawing connections to real world concepts and situations using these STEM activities. And they weren't really consistent about tying these activities to careers and educational pathways and how youth could use their interest to pursue STEM education and careers. And because that was such an important part of this project, that was really good to know. And when we talked to the people that we had observed, they really thought that they were doing this. They just didn't realize that they weren't being very deliberate and overt about it. And it really helped strengthen some of their programs. And we also were able to use this tool to identify key practices of sites that had the highest out of school time scores based on this tool. And what we found was that across these sites, the ones that had the highest scores had 4 key practices. So they were using a curricula that was established and had been tested. They were doing a great job with working with volunteers who were able to serve as STEM experts for these activities. They were also doing a really good job recruiting diverse STEM experts and role models. And this last point is really critical. They were being very consistent in providing this one-on-one instruction for youth. So youth that were having issues or needed extra help were really able to get more individualized attention. And why I feel like this is so important is because when we did interviews with youth and their parents, time and again, they brought up the fact that they just were not getting enough individualized attention in the STEM and science activities that they were doing in school. That's one of the reasons that they really enjoyed these STEM out of school time experiences, was that the staff was there to really help them and guide them and provide them some extra attention. And it just really goes to show how valuable these experiences are, that doing science and math in school is just not enough if kids are not able to get some extra help. So based on all of this information that we learned, we were able to revise the 4-H STEM career pathway for youth success. And the main thing that we revised was really to put in this idea that at each phase of this pathway, we really need to be deliberate about connecting these STEM experiences to college and to careers, and really trying to help youth connect the activities that they enjoy and help them see the potential for a career in STEM, regardless of what activity they enjoyed. So really being deliberate at each phase to help them draw those connections and to start to see themselves as potential STEM experts themselves. And we also provide examples for each of these different levels of this career pathway. So different things and different ways we could help youth see and reach youth and provide them these different activities. All right, so I do want to acknowledge 4-H Council and Lockheed Martin, as well as all of the dedicated 4-H professionals and volunteers who continue to make a difference in the lives of youth, and for everyone that helped us with this study and this project. And here are the references that we used. And then we also, as I said before, we have several publications that came out of this work. There were several different aspects that we highlighted in our different publications. So we have plenty of time for questions. We also have plenty of time for you guys to share with each other if there are promising practices and best practices that you would like other people to learn from. I hope you take advantage. One of the things that we found was the grantees oftentimes learn from each other just as much as they learned from the activities that they were doing in their own state. So what questions do you have, or what would you like to share?
This is Rakia Drawhood from Prairie View, Texas. And I could you go back to the slide about the 4 practices?
Is this the slide?
That one, yes. Okay, when you say recruited diverse science experts and role models, can you describe what you mean by diverse?
Yes. So so states that were really successful were able to recruit science experts in different fields from different racial and ethnic groups, and as well as women. So for example, we had robotics teams that were led by an African-American woman who was an engineering professor. So different types, different role models.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Well, I really appreciate everyone's time today. It was great to be able to share with you this initiative and some of our findings. Please feel free to reach out to me or to Dr. Donaldson if you have any other questions. And I hope everyone has a great conference.
Did you
Thank
put
you,
the link in the
Dr.
chat?
Franck.
Did you put that link in the chat?
There was one request to put the link in the chat. I think the link to the report.
Oh, okay.
Mhm. There it is. All right, so if there are no further questions, I think next on our agenda is a break